My name's David Brown. I'm the Director of Regulation at the Education Workforce Council. In this session, I'm going to be talking to you about the EWC and what we mean by regulating in the public interest. To give you a little bit more information about the registration of practitioners, I'm going to talk to you about the Code of Professional Conduct and Practice, and then I'm going to give you some learning points that we've picked up at a high level from our fitness to practice cases. In terms of the Education Workforce Register, I've put on this slide a little bit more information about the categories that we had at the end of March 2024. This information includes independent school teachers and independent special post-16 institution teachers and a wider group of youth workers and youth support workers who joined the register in May 2023. The register has increased again since May 2024 as we have now added principals and senior leaders from further education institutions and adult learning practitioners who are now required to register. We're quite unique in the sense that we now register across 13 different categories of registration. The important thing to remember is if you're not registered in those categories, you're not legally allowed to be able to work in those areas. For those people who want to be registered with the EWC, they have to complete an application form, and in some cases people will have things that they need to declare to us that we need to look at to determine if they're suitable to be registered. The sort of declarations that we would look at will be criminal convictions or cautions, or what we've loosely called in this slide other declarations. And what we mean by this is if there has been past or pending action with an employer, or there's been some kind of disciplinary action taken by another regulatory body. In some cases, we'll also look at what we call a failure to declare information, which is where we find out that people have completed an application form and they haven't told us about something that they should have declared to us. You can see that of the declarations that we received for 2023-24, 55.7% of the declarations related to criminal convictions or cautions, and 44.3% of those declarations related to what we've called other declarations. What this information tells us is that for the vast majority of people who have told us that they have something to declare, they've been through our assessment process and they've been deemed to be suitable to be registered. You can also see the number of people who've made a declaration to us and for whatever reason they've withdrawn their application. The important thing for this group is that they're not able to work in any of the registration categories. In fact, that will continue to be the case unless they resubmit their application form again and complete that whole suitability process. And finally, there are those who have made some kind of declaration to the EWC which has been considered by our independent panels, and our independent panelists have decided that they're not suitable to be registered. Again, if they're not able to be registered, they're not able to work in any of the registration categories. Reasons for refusing registration applications will obviously depend upon the declaration that the applicant has made. Those people who've made disclosures to us about criminal convictions or cautions will find that where there has been a refusal, it's because they've received a substantial custodial sentence which maybe has not been served, or in some cases an independent suitability committee has found that the proven offences were too serious to allow that application to be granted. In terms of refusing applicants for those other declarations, this is often where applicants have declared that they've been sanctioned by employers or other regulators for serious acts of dishonesty. For registrants in particular, honesty and integrity are key tenets of the Code of Professional Conduct and Practice. So, when considering whether or not an applicant should be registered in cases where applicants have demonstrated examples of dishonesty or a serious lack of integrity, independent suitability committees can be reluctant to grant registration. In cases where registration is refused, applicants are allowed to reapply 12 months after the refusal decision was taken. As a regulator, we take our gatekeeper role very seriously, ensuring our processes are both fair and robust. I'm going to talk to you about the Code of Professional Conduct and Practice, and the first thing to say is it's a really important document that we're required to produce as part of the legislation which established the Education Workforce Council. We're not only required to provide this important document, but we're also required to review it every 3 years or every time we add a new group of registrants. So what is it? Well, it's an important document that sets out the key principles of good conduct and practice, and it should guide a registrant's judgment and decisions. And it also informs the public, including parents, guardians, learners and other stakeholders, of the standards that can be expected from registrants. If registrants don't comply with the code, then it may call into question their registration. In order to provide more assistance to registrants in meeting the expectations of the code, we've made available a number of good practice guides. These documents are not statutory and they're not mandatory. They simply provide information which should provide more context. In terms of those people who potentially have breached the code, there is a referral to the Education Workforce Council. There are a number of sources of those referrals. As you might expect, the most common referral will be the employer, where someone has either been dismissed or they might have been dismissed. We also receive referrals from the police, so that would be for criminal offences, for example, drink driving or drug driving, but pretty much any type of criminal offence that you may be able to imagine. And there are other potential sources of referral, whether that be complaints or self-referral, where perhaps somebody has been convicted and they're informing us of the fact that they've received a conviction by the courts. In terms of types of behaviour that we look at, this slide will provide you with a summary. I'm not going to dwell on this slide to any great extent, as most of these categories are probably quite self-explanatory. At a lower level, you may find it's things like blurring of the lines of professional boundaries, and at a higher level, it could include quite serious sexualised behaviour towards learners, and those would get captured within these categories. So those which we couldn't put into those 10 boxes, we've added to the right-hand side. These are examples of cases which haven't made the top 10, but are still significant. So, for example, bullying and harassment of colleagues, issues around the finances within establishments, and breaches of confidentiality. Because we have to act in the public interest, because our processes have to be transparent, our process will tend to be held in public. This does mean that they often attract media interest, and here you can read some actual headlines about either EWC cases or General Teaching Council cases, which was our predecessor. All of these cases were heard in the public domain and people were able to watch them. This is an important difference to be aware of in terms of the way that an employer would process a particular case and the way that the EWC would process a disciplinary case. One theme we receive a number of referrals about relates to a registrant's use of social media. So now I'll just talk you through some guidance on how to use social media effectively and safely. The first thing is to say that the standard expected of registrants do not change with online communication. Social media can encourage casual dialogue, so be sure to establish the boundaries between your public and private life. It isn't uncommon for people to engage with high-profile figures on social media channels, and in some cases potentially get into disputes with them. Be mindful that laws of copyright and defamation do still apply. Behaviour online can result in criminal or civil action. For example, there have been instances where judges have taken exception to the behaviour of members of the public, for example commenting on legal proceedings and taking action for things like contempt of court. You really need to think about what you say, what you're doing, and how that could be perceived by other members of the public. What you share reflects on you and your profession. Be aware that others can share your posts. Remember that once you've posted it, you've lost control of it. Even if you post something and you decide that you want to delete it, someone may have already screenshotted it, which means that they have a photograph, a snapshot of what you said, and they can share that with other people. The fact that you've deleted it doesn't necessarily mean it's gone away, so consider any post, comment or message as being permanent. It's also important to remember that even deleted items can stay on servers. There's no such thing as 100% privacy. Try and Google your name along with the name of the place that you work and see what comes back. In some cases you may find that your digital footprint is a lot bigger than you thought it was. Take a look at the information that comes back. Are you happy with it? Has somebody said something about you that you're not happy about? That perhaps doesn't paint you in the professional light that you think that it should have done? Don't be frightened to say to somebody, "I'm not happy with that, I would like you to take it down, please." These sorts of things are quite reasonable requests to make of people. Protect your reputation. Think about your image online. It takes a long time to build up a good reputation. It can take seconds to lose one, so take care. Also, breaching confidentiality is easy to do without realizing. For example, you're on Facebook and you may be involved in some kind of ongoing discussion on a group. It may be that you've made several comments on a particular issue. People can go back, scroll through and find your name and what you said and join up the dots. For that reason, you should be very careful to make sure that you don't talk about your work or anything that might identify any issues that relate to your work. Don't accept friends requests from learners or share email addresses or text. Don't discuss learners, parents, colleagues or your place of work, and don't be complacent. Build an online fortress. Make sure that you use the privacy settings and the security settings of the platform you're using and that you understand them, and definitely do not share passwords. Comply with policies, procedures and the EWC code. Employers will have plenty of policies which will help registrants to understand what they need to do in terms of social media, and these are supported by many other documents, including our good practice guides. And finally, it's really important that there is some form of oversight in your communication with learners, so always use official channels of communication. Having heard all of this, why don't you give your social media presence a spring clean? It's something we advise you to do from time to time. And follow the guidance, it's there to protect you. If you're looking for extra support or guidance, don't forget to check our website for the latest resources, including good practice guides and short animations, which further explain about the code and how you can follow it as part of your daily practice. If you want to get in touch with us to discuss anything covered in this session, the contact details are available on the screen.